The Latin American Revolution by Yusra, Oshika, Gabby, Royalty, and Michelle. The ingredients for red velvet cupcakes include 3 eggs, 1 cup of water, a half cup of vegetable oil, and obviously cake mix.
Before we get into the cause of the Latin American Revolution, it is important to briefly summarize the background first.
Okay, so for the background, the cake mix represents it, and it's basically about Latin America wanting independence. That's like the overall idea of why this revolution even started. They wanted independence from European colonies, specifically Portugal and Spain. The main issues or causes were economics, political, and societal hierarchy.
Following what Royalty said, the Latin American revolutions were clearly fueled by economic oppression, a rigid social hierarchy, and political inspiration. Spain and Portugal's strict mercantilist policies heavily taxed the colonies, frustrating Creole elites who had wealth but no political power. Society was strictly divided, with Spanish-born peninsulars at the top and indigenous African populations at the bottom. This cast of pasting from colonial Latin America illustrates this racial hierarchy, categorizing the mixed-race individuals with specific labels. People were inspired by the Enlightenment ideals and the success of the American and French revolutions. Latin America saw their independence as their path to change.
Just like how you cannot bake a cake without water, the people of Latin America, such as Portugal and Spain, strongly depended on their political monarchs. Although Portugal had a short constitutional period, they returned back to their absolutist monarchy, and Spain remained to have an absolutist monarchy.
Like what Oshika said, Portugal briefly adopted a constitutional monarchy in 1820, influenced by liberal movements in Europe. However, when King John VI returned from Brazil, internal conflicts between liberals and absolutists led to the monarchy reverting to an absolute rule under his son, Dom Miguel. This shift back to an absolutism reinforced colonial control. Spain, on the other hand, maintained its absolute monarchy throughout the revolutionary period. King Ferdinand VII, after being restored to the throne in 1814, rejected constitutional reforms and ruled with an iron grip. His refusal to grant autonomy to the colonies only intensified revolutionary moments, as Latin Americans saw independence as their only path to self-governance.
So as we previously put in water, and we all know that oil and water are mixed, that represents the trade restrictions that Latin America had because of Portugal. Basically, the only place that they could trade to was Portugal, which was considered the mother country. They could only export and import from there, which gave them a lack of resources that they could bring in back to their country, and also extreme taxes on local businesses because things were more high in demand.
Elaborating on what Royalty said, Portugal's strict mercantilist policies severely limited economic development in its Latin American colonies. By enforcing a trade monopoly, Portugal ensured that all imports and exports flowed exclusively through the mother country. This meant that colonies couldn't seek better trade deals elsewhere, leaving them dependent on Portugal's pricing and supply. Essential goods were often scarce, and the lack of competition kept prices artificially high, creating economic strain on both businesses and consumers.
The next step, which is the 3 eggs, goes along with the long-term cause, and each egg represents the social classes and basically like the social inequality, with the peninsulars being at top, which are the Spanish-born elites, the Creoles, the Spanish-born Spaniards, and the Mestizos, indigenous people, and African-American slaves, which were obviously at the bottom because they experienced the most exploitation. The mixing of all the ingredients represents how, as well as the long term, the short term, and the intermediate term, which we will be going over later in this video, all come together in order to represent the revolt of the Latin Americans.
Heating on the oven represents the intermediate cause of basically Latin American people starting to think like Enlightenment thinkers, basically self-government, self-rule, knowing that they can govern themselves and not need somebody else to do it. It also represents the rising temperatures with the French Revolution that weakened Europe's economy, and that is why, when they were weak, specifically Portugal and Spain, that is why the Latin American leaders thought it would be a good time to rebel.
Following up with what Royalty said, the ideas of the Enlightenment spread rapidly across Latin America, inspiring many to challenge the old systems of authority. Thinkers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Voltaire promoted the ideas of liberty, equality, and the right to self-determination, concepts that resonated deeply with those living under colonial rule. The timing of these movements was crucial. The French Revolution in 1789, which was heavily influenced by Enlightenment thought, not only inspired the Latin American revolutionaries, but also weakened Europeans' powers. The war and upheaval in France, along with the broader European conflicts that followed, created instability in Spain and Portugal. Both monarchies were struggling economically and politically, with Spain dealing with internal strife and Portugal distracted by the Napoleon Wars. This weakened the state of economic power and provided a rare opportunity for Latin America colonies to revolt, as the traditional authorities were no longer in a position to maintain control.
The rising of the cupcakes represents the short-term cause within all of this, which is Napoleon's invasion. And in this invasion, he basically overthrew the king of Spain with his own brother. And with that, the people of Spain realized, like, if their king, which was appointed by divine right, was able to get overthrown that easily, then who would govern them? And with those ideas, they basically think again like Enlightenment thinkers, and yeah.
Piggybacking off of what Oshika said, Napoleon Bonaparte, a French military leader and emperor, invaded Spain and Portugal in order to expand his empire and weaken European powers. He forced Spain's king, Ferdinand VII, to exile, placing his brother Joseph on the throne, while Portugal's royal family fled to Brazil, temporarily making it the center of the Portuguese Empire. This disruption in European authority led Latin Americans to question their loyalty to the monarchies. Without clear leadership, many colonies began to establish their own local governments. In Spain's case, the monarchy legitimately was undermined, which sparked movements for independence across Spanish America.
Is it good, Mom? Is it good?
Yay!
Bye, thank you for watching. Please excuse my sniffling and very sick right now.